Well, this first part of your essay is going to take a little bit of time because you're going to be cannibalizing David Gran's trial by fire for the themes that you're going to write about. You're going to set it up by illustrating those themes with what David Gran has written about. And I give you a reason for that. I always build in critical reading, especially when there's research, because experience has showed me a lot of people will just cut and paste, but not really understand what they're doing. Just kind of put a lot of stuff that sounds pretty good together, and their papers get pretty chaotic that way. So I want you to create the themes from your own critical reading. We've talked about a lot of them. Faulty fire forensics, that's a big one. And it's good to keep in mind that this is not confirmation bias. What it is really coming out of basically just poor training, if you will. And I think I want to move over here. I'll give you an example. And by the way, this is how you look it up anyway. You do a search, crazed glass, for instance. And right after the first entry, you can see it says forensic. I guess this is not behaving, but anyway, I don't know why it's up there when I want it to be down here. Stupid thing. Well, maybe it'll go down there. Nope. It's just being dumb. But anyway, right after the highlighted crazed glass, in the middle of the page, forensics textbooks had long described the effect as a key indicator that a fire had burned fast and hot, meaning it had been fueled by a liquid accelerant, causing the glass to fracture. So there it is. Vasquez and Fogg were working off a textbook theory that happened to be totally wrong. And so that's a good thing. And then if you look at it, if you're going to do fire forensics, take crazed glass and you go into the second half of it and you get the Oakland Hills fire. Maybe that's, I don't know, 10 pages in or something like that. But anyway, pretty far down, you get the Oakland Hills fire. And that is when the idea of crazed glass being a sign of an accelerant was proven wrong. And let me go back to the idea. When you look into fire forensics, you look at all of those things that were wrong, and you can just search the text and kind of read around the citations. For instance, when I looked at crazed glass, if I looked just at, oh yeah, crazed glass, they thought that caused the fire, that'd be something. But I think it's equally important to know that following this bolded blue, that it was a textbook example. And that's something that, trained arson specialists would know from their study, that crazed glass is caused by an accelerant, by somebody lighting a fire. Now, and you can just go through crazed glass, poor configurations, V-shaped burns, all of the different fire indicators that were proven to be completely bogus, mostly by the Lime Street fire. So check that out. That's a cool thing to look at, and you get the way it was used in the first section, I should say, to make Willinghan look guilty, and it convinced everybody, the jury and anybody who read that first part and paused and thought about, is he guilty? He looks bad. But then you get into the other parts of the story and you realize all of those arson indicators are just totally bogus. So the whole foundation of the case, it just crumbles before your eyes. Now, confirmation bias is another good thing to look at, but you have to look at those things that really had an innocent explanation sitting right next to them. Not crazed glass, because that was a textbook. It's just a bogus theory, but hey, sometimes we're only as good as our sources. But confirmation bias is when you read something one way, and if you just turned your head a little bit to the right or left, you'd see another explanation. The barbecue on the porch. That is so crucial because, hey, that's the only place they found accelerant. Maybe the accelerant came from the barbecue or the lighter fluid that was next to the barbecue. Nobody thought of that. All they thought of was that, oh yeah, the monster, he burned the house. Of course they found accelerant. Nobody questioned that there was no residue inside the house, only on the front porch. And we know the barbecue was there and the lighter fluid. So that means, they probably tested dozens and dozens of places in the house and they had no sign of accelerant. Anybody with fresh eyes would say, well, then he didn't use it because there's no evidence of it in the house. But no, they were so certain, so believing Vasquez and Fogg. That's confirmation bias. His moving his car, two very clear interpretations. That's confirmation bias. The refrigerator in the kitchen, two very clear and, obvious opposing definitions of it. That's confirmation bias. The posters and the tattoo, both an innocent and an incriminating interpretation right in front of us. The inconsistencies with Webb. If he had a good defense attorney, he would have noticed immediately that Webb said, oh, they killed the kids because they'd beaten them and they didn't want to get in trouble for having beaten their kids. There was no evidence of the kids having been beaten in the autopsy. That should have disqualified Webb. So all of these things are there. And so confirmation bias works two ways. One of them is people are so hell-bent on finding him guilty that they ignore the exonerating or innocence-making explanation right next to them. And the other one is the lawyer doesn't squawk at all. And that kind of leads to the next one about shabby lawyers for poor people. One of the things that caught the attention regarding shabby lawyers for poor people, and I'm going to just look up the Barbie is her name. And when we get into the latter part of the story, and I'm just cruising through, and what I want to get to is right about here. Yeah, exactly. When Gilbert is reading through the case and she looks at the Barbie testimony, she realizes that she fully contradicted herself. On the day of the fire, she said Willinghan looked like terribly distraught and tried to break into the house. And then 2 weeks later, she said he looked like he was faking it and he didn't try to do anything unless when people were around, just to make it look like he cared. So she flipped her statement to the court. Now, a good lawyer would have said, throw it out. You can't contradict yourself because the court doesn't know which one to believe. But not in this case. And the same thing happens with Monahan. If I can spell it correctly, Monaghan. He also has a reversal. And it just happens that Mrs. Gilbert figures it out and wonders what went wrong. And so that's another testimony. And then you have the explanation from that. ETL Drawer saying basically the mind is not a passive machine. 2 lines below the highlight there. Once you believe in something, once you expect something, it changes the way you perceive information and the way your memory recalls it. So Monahan and Barbie originally thought Willinghan was an innocent and terribly distraught father, but later on, after the investigators say we know he killed them, their memories change. So that has to do with the plasticity of memory. And so it's a really fascinating thing. But anyway, a good lawyer would have brought that up and said, hey, throw that testimony out. That's contradictory. We don't know which one to believe. And then finally, jailhouse snitches is kind of a sub-theme. And similarly, faulty memory is kind of a sub-theme. You wouldn't want to hang a whole paper on it. But again, if you look at faulty fire forensics, confirmation bias, or the evidence that his junky lawyers are half the reason he died, you can also look up the very stark difference between Willinghan and Willis, which is in the Gran article as well. Obviously, they had identical crimes. Hearst said you could have just switched their names. It was so identical. But Willis, with good lawyers, like lawyers who spent millions of dollars to defend him, he gets off shortly after Willinghan was executed. Identical stories. So again, I just want to kind of turn it around here. It's already 10 minutes, but cannibalize trial by fire. and build up 2 to 3 pages on one of those principal themes, and then you're ready to go do your research. Don't do it the other way around. And this is a challenging thing, but I want you to really dig deep into that article, get the best quotes, get a strong feeling for how these themes work, and that'll anchor your essay, and then the research will build on that. I hope this helps.